lately there's been some lackluster UFC Apex cards. Like there's been some fun fights on them, but for the most part, it's just like kind of a dull atmosphere as we've talked about before. But UFC 298 was this past weekend, and the atmosphere in Anaheim was electric. This card was honestly, like I said, a breath of fresh air. So it was constant action from start to finish, and I say we just hop right into it. So we have the main event, Alex Volkanovski versus Ilia Topuria, and in this fight, man, talk about maybe not a shock, but in the way that it happened was a shock. So, in case you guys didn't see it, Ilia Topuria knocked out Alexander Volkanovski with one of the most perfect right hooks we've ever seen in the second round, and he stays undefeated and he becomes the UFC featherweight champion and defeats Alex Volkanovski, who's never lost at featherweight to this point until now. So, just my initial thoughts, amazing performance from Ilia Topuria. Great boxing. I mean, he really looked exactly like he has in his past few fights. Just great boxing. He's just really great all around, honestly. But you just look, I don't know about you, but to me, it looked like he was just a step ahead of Volkanovski the whole time when it comes to speed, power, just everything. He seemed a little ahead of him, and I don't know if it's because Volkanovski is getting like a little old at 35. You know, that could be a reason, but I also do believe that Ilia Topuria just is that guy, and I think that people trying to like take away from the win is kind of like misguided because this dude is the real deal. There's a reason why he's undefeated. There's a reason why he just beat Alexander Volkanovski, and we have a new champion now at featherweight, which is really crazy. What did you think of this performance by Ilia Topuria?
Yeah, man, I think like something I think it goes to show that it really does like how you start, especially with Topuria in this fight. I think he's the one that just he made sure that Volk wasn't gonna get the center of the cage at any point, and so like from there, even though I think Volk looked fine, but you could tell like in that first round that think like especially over a five round fight that Topuria's clearly got the stamina and the cardio. Like he can hang all 5 rounds and give Volk like a ton of damage in either which way. And like I said when we were previewing this fight, I didn't think there was really any in between. I thought it was either gonna end quick or it was gonna go all 5 rounds. But just for it to actually like play out in the sense that Volk, he he did just looked overmatched. He looked like this straight up he ran into a guy who's a more technical, powerful striker at this point in time, of course. And Volk, I think it goes to show, I guess, like something, I think that you would have liked to see a bit of after that first round. Obviously, like I just mentioned, like I think there was definitely room to be a bit skeptical after that first round, but obviously you don't question a guy like Volkanovski with his resume and all that. But Topuria, like he had the game plan down. All he had to really do was just put together that just elite striking of his, and once again not let Volk take center stage. And yeah, man, he stole the show. He took the title, and now he's the one in Volk's featherweight resume. So
Yeah,
that's pretty. Yeah, dude. It's one of those things where it's like, because we were we like you just said before, when we were previewing the fight, like there was absolutely no reason to downplay Ilia Topuria and what he could bring to this fight, and not like obviously when you see Volk defending that featherweight title, it's almost like a all but certain thing that he's gonna end up retaining it. But this fight, like even obviously Volk himself with the whole putting on the whole old person persona and whatnot, like it's just I guess just where we are right now,
I mean, time moves forward. That's just,
yeah.
that's the nature of life, but it's also the nature of the sport. I mean, Ilia Topuria has been saying the whole time that this is exactly what was going to
Yeah,
happen. So,
you could tell too, like Topuria, just bringing up the Bryce Mitchell fight, for instance. Like, you could tell he's come, like, he's improved, like, a lot since then. Like, he's clearly been, like, you know training, ramping up for this fight for a while, and he's here now. He's got the belt. And yeah, just in terms of his performance, like, that was, yeah, man, that was a absolute blast. Like, you leave no stone unturned. Like, you have a clear winner. Like, he put Volk down. There wasn't an early stoppage, nothing like that.
And he was winning the whole fight too. That's the other
Yeah.
thing. I think he really lived up to his own expectations, and like a lot of people were mad at the hype that he was kind of giving himself. But at the end of the day, when you have that level of self-belief, you could really beat a guy like Volk if you truly believe that. I mean, Ilia Topuria had not lost, and it still has not lost. So it's just kind of like, it's crazy to see that he really spoke this into existence. And I believe that he was really good, but like you were kind of saying, when Volkanovski defends the featherweight title, it's kind of hard to pick against him. And Ilia Topuria really just showed that, like, the next generation is here. And like I said, time moves forward. There's going to be a new champion. It was going to happen at some point, and Ilia Topuria was determined to be that man.
Yeah. Now it's a question of, does the immediate rematch happen? Because once again, in this fight here, like, clearly, like, Volk, like, obviously this wasn't his night. He was outmatched in this given matchup, and now it's like, well, do we really need to see that rematch? And
I hope not, though. Like, and I me, man, I love Volk, but at the end of the day, like you said, like, it was very cut and dry. It's not like we were debating, like a stoppage or like who was winning before the stoppage. Like, Topuria dominated the fight, and I really think that they have a chance to, like, build the division even further, like trying to get him to fight other contenders. And Volkanovski in general, like, he's fought a lot over the past few years, and he's had some bad losses now in the past year or so. And it's just like, I wouldn't mind seeing him take a little bit of time off. But also, what I think about immediate rematches for the most part. Like, they kind of just take away from the first fight if the other guy wins it. Because, like we were talking, I remember about one time, Nunes versus Pena. Like, Juliana Pena had this crazy upset against Amanda Nunes. And I get, like, why you give Nunes the immediate rematch, because she's one of the greatest fighters ever. But at the same time, now when Nunes beats Pena, no one really cares about this amazing upset. Like, I think back in the old days of the UFC, like when George St. Pierre lost to Matt Serra, they didn't give GSP an immediate rematch. And GSP was like, he wasn't the dominant champ he ended up being yet, but he was the champion, and he was really good. A lot of people liked him, and he still had to fight his way back. And I just think that we've gotten a little carried away with the immediate rematches. And believe me, I love Volk. I want to see him get another title shot, but at the same time, there are a lot of contenders at featherweight that Ilia Topuria can fight, and I'd rather see those fights rather than see a repeat of what we just saw.
Yeah, I'm not sure what Volk's corner was telling him after the end of that first round, because I think it was fair to give a 10-9 to him, but, like, obviously with a guy like Volk, I mean, maybe it really was just underestimating Ilia Topuria, to be honest.
I don't know, though. I think, like, because, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but I know, like, a lot of people are. Like, they're making excuses for Volk, and it's because everybody loves Volk. How could you not, right? But people need to realize that this dude is the real deal, and you don't knock out a guy like Volk in that way unless you're the real deal. I mean, Islam Makhachev is really the only other person who's made him look like that, and we know how great he is. Ilia Topuria is undefeated, man. He has 2 countries behind him with Spain and Georgia. Yeah. I think that this dude has the talk. He has the fighting ability to really turn himself into a massive star in the promotion. And, I don't know exactly what could be next for him. It could be the winner of Yair versus Ortega, next week's card in Mexico. But, and even Max Holloway if he wins at UFC 300. But I know it's a different division, but still. I just think that I want to see something different. Like, this wasn't the fight. It wasn't like Islam Volk 1 where I was like, we need to see a rematch because that was so debatable. To me, it was like we watched a star in a star-making performance, kind of like Conor McGregor versus Chad Mendes or Jose Aldo. And I know people have been talking about the parallels between those two this week. I think Topuria still has some work to do before he gets to that level. But at the same time, his skills are phenomenal. And I really think this dude is going to go on a run whether he fights Volk next or not, honestly, because he is that guy. And I think that this win proves that he's that guy. And then when you think about Volk, too, I don't know, like, he says he wants the rematch with Ilya, but at the same time, I remember we were talking about this yesterday. I feel like a move to 155 would be smarter for him because, even if he comes back and beats Topuria, who's he going to fight after that? Like, he's already cleared out that whole division at 145. Like, the only other contenders I could really think of are maybe like Arnold Allen, Evloev, and do you really think that, like, they're going to get through Volk? Even now, like, I'm just not sure about that, man. I'd rather see him go on to, like, a new division. It makes it more exciting. And it's not like he's bad at lightweight. I mean, I know he's technically 0-2 in that division in the UFC, but at the same time, he only fought the champion, who is one of the best fighters pound for pound on the planet. So I personally would like to see him move up to 155. I don't know what you think.
I mean, I don't know. Because it could be something like, now Volk clearly sees the trajectory that Ilya Topuria is on. Even after the fight, Ilya Topuria he's already downplaying the entire division. He's like, the rest of this division, like in terms of like Movsar Evloev, for instance, he mentioned how he doesn't have a finish yet, but he's saying like he's pretty much already like got his sights set on like bigger things. Like obviously the Conor McGregor call out, for instance. Yeah. Like he's really.
Which, no offense to Topuria, it's never gonna happen. It's never like, even if Conor wants to fight him, it will not be anywhere near 145 pounds.
You get the point. Like he wants to legit make his name as like legit one of the UFC's biggest marquee names. Like not just the champion that's gonna come and go. Like he wants to overtake Volk at some point. So Volkanovski probably now clearly sees something like that and wants to be the one to, put that to a halt and
he's a great competitor, man. Back. He really is a great competitor. That's part of the reason why you love Volkanovski. He gets knocked out like that, and immediately after he's like, I want to fight him again. Like, who's crazy enough to say something like that? And I get that this is fighting, and these guys, they love to do it, but still, not a lot of people like that.
Volk pulled out Zuckerberg for his corner and everything for his fight. It's like,
let me ask you something about that, and then we're about to get like banned for this now, probably. But when I think about this, does he think that makes him look more human? Like, I'm not one of these idiots who thinks that he's like a robot. I literally mean like, because he's so rich and he's like out of touch. Yeah. Like, does he really think people don't know that he like probably paid to do that, or like he only got that because he's who he is?
Yeah, I think it's literally like he's everyone sees him hanging with the, like, because it was with Adesanya and Kamaru Usman too when they were a champ. Like, everyone sees him hang out with the champions. It's like, oh, like this has to mean something, right? But no, because now neither of them are champion anymore. And so
maybe he's giving them bad luck. I don't know.
But
he's screwing them in the metaverse.
It's always I think it's always interesting. I think like at least with any champion's first fight after losing the title, I think that's always like something that there's always something to take away at each given point of the fight. So
you get a view of their mentality too, because someone like Volk, who's been champion for so long, and I get that he's lost in between technically at lightweight, but this is the first time he hasn't been a champion since literally 2019. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that's
like
nuts.
How do you come back from that? You're 35. You have a family. You've kind of done it all in a sense. So I'm really curious, like you were saying, like what is going to happen when Volk comes back.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about it before, right? When after he fought Islam for the first time and he got knocked out that first time, it's like, well,
you mean the second fight?
No, the second fight, and he got knocked out in that fight. It's like, well, now we're talking about, and then that's obviously him as a challenger in another division. Like they're talking about him then, like, dude, you should pump the brakes a little bit and take some time and get yourself right. Like, you still have a title to defend. Now he's got no title to defend, and he just got knocked out for a second time in a row. It's so like, yeah, it's like you hate to say like it's a slippery slope, but like yeah, you just mentioned like he is 35 years old, and the chin seemingly is getting like weaker and hanging looser and all that, and so it's like it's unfortunate because obviously the pitbull that Volk is like, he can maybe like going forward he can't exert as much cardio in these early rounds and risk what just happened uh, in this fight. But I think, like, once again, I think that this fight in particular, like, you know, Ilya Topuria was not gonna let him take the center of the cage for a second, and so yeah, that's just how that went. The power just straight up overwhelmed Volk. There's just so many like I guess angles that fans are taking as like their take on this fight, and like it's fair and all, but at the end of the day, like Volkanovski is the one defending the belt. Like you can't really like tell, like I guess try to tell him like not because obviously you're not speaking directly to him, but like make it known like, oh, he should have done this, like what are you doing in this instance, Volk, like what did you think was gonna happen and all that,
like us idiots sitting here being like,
like,
the former pound for pound number one guy, like he should have done that.
Yeah.
But like what do I know? But
Yeah.
I definitely see what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. I think you don't want to see, because like losses are gonna happen and whatnot, but you don't want to see the guy get finished constantly. Like like it's crazy. Like I'm not even that like I'm trying to make this parallel or something, because it's absolutely wild. I feel like what I'm about to say, but like you don't want to see like a freaking Bigfoot Silva thing happen where you get finished.
I don't think that's gonna happen.
Exactly.
He's not that like he we gotta pump the brakes a little bit. I mean, he lost to Islam Makhachev and Ilya Topuria. He's not losing to bums.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
But I think what like I guess the point is like a guy like Volk who wants to be in there constantly and whatnot, and once again dating back to what we were saying after he lost to Islam for the second time, like it's all right to take some time and consider things and all that.
I hope he does. But to end it on just talking about Ilya Topuria, man, still undefeated, just beat one of probably the greatest fighters in modern UFC history, and the world is kind of his oyster, and he's treating it as such. So, like I said, I think he's got star potential. I love the fact that there's some new blood now at featherweight. We have a new champion, and I'm very interested to see what happens in the future. In the co-main now, we got Robert Whittaker versus Paulo Costa, and that fight was just an absolute battle, and I loved watching it. But in case you guys didn't see it, Robert Whittaker defeats Paulo Costa by unanimous decision, 229-28 and 130-27. And before we get into the fight, I wanted to ask you this, because I remember we were talking about it. I'm fine with the 29-28s, and I do think that Robert Whittaker won this fight. But a 30-27, I can't get behind that. And that's what Mike Bell gave him. And the reason why I say that is because for rounds 1 and 3 were super close. But round 1 especially, Whittaker was winning the round, and he kind of compromised Costa's lead leg at first. But when Paulo Costa ends the round with a spinning heel kick like that hurts Whittaker as badly as it did. I mean, Whittaker was sleepwalking at the end of that round. So I get that there is a time limit, but if that round goes on 10, 15 more seconds, Paulo Costa wins that fight. And in my opinion, that gives him the round. So I'm cool with 29-28, but 30-27, I just can't get behind that, and I wanted to say that. But what did you think of the fight?
Yeah, I guess like maybe it's been a little while since we've like actually analyzed like a scorecard and like had where it was like controversial enough to where we have to mention it and call it out. And like now in this case, it's Robert Whittaker won the fight anyways. But like that still obviously shouldn't excuse something like that. It's like when you have a near finish like that, like it's obviously worth noting, and it's like
because like I think about it like this, like if you're looking at it just on the numbers, like years from now, like let's say you kind of don't remember the fight and you see the scorecards, you're gonna see that Whittaker won this fight 30-27 on one of the scorecards. Like I just don't agree with that, So I don't know, man. Like I
Yeah,
think
and
that
it always
it just
begs
gives a
the
false history in a way of the fight because it was not that one
yeah, and
sided.
it's like there's no one has a better seat than these judges literally at the front. So it's like it does have like that skewed aspect to it, and it's definitely fair to call it out on that. But at least with I think kind of what I was kind of mentioning before with the main event and Topuria, the one establishing the pace and really the one determining how the fight is gonna go. I think it's the same with how Robert Whittaker fought this fight, and like that's not even a knock on not Paulo Costa either. Like obviously Paulo Costa's been out for a while, and this is his first fight back, and he's fighting a surging contender as well, and Robert Whittaker. And so like just from the get go, I think Robert Whittaker like just came in with the right game plan. I think he seemed comfortable in there. Like he wanted to take it to Paulo early and try to just get him out of there.
See, the thing with Paulo though too is like his style. It's easy to say this after the fact, and I didn't really think of it beforehand. But Paulo Costa is a pressure fighter, and Whittaker is that guy who's so good at kind of like using his footwork and switching stances and countering, and that's really what he was doing the whole fight. He was drawing Costa in, and sure, Costa was landing so many big punches and nice kicks, but at the same time, Whittaker was piecing up the lead leg, hitting him with the jab, just hitting him from different angles. And like you said, Paulo kind of played into his hand a little bit, and I think that's like a good thing when it comes to Whittaker's game plan. So I mean, I
Yeah,
really think they both left it all out
exactly.
there though, which is amazing.
Yeah,
Like I'm
and
glad we got a good fight.
I think just the longer the fight went on, like the more it was favoring Paulo Costa pretty much. But obviously, the guy like Rob Whittaker, who's a former champion, he's been doing this for a while. He's fought pretty much just about the entire division, and then we'll even talk about a fight that hasn't happened for him yet, that hopefully happens. But yeah, I think like that's a tall task for anybody really, and yeah, it seemed like as long as Whittaker could just keep it on the feet, like things are gonna go all right for him. Obviously, until that kick from Costa at the end of the round that like really like got everyone out of their seat, in which you thought like whoa, like that was close right there, and then you clearly, like you mentioned, like you clearly saw Robert Whittaker dazed and whatnot.
He
So
stumbled to the corner.
yeah,
Like
so I think just like I guess maybe like a wherewithal thing to just make sure that he doesn't actually get finished in these final seconds of the round. But I think this fight was, at least for the main card, like this was the best fight of the night.
I would say it was a really fun fight. Definitely the war that we were hoping it was going to be. And I mean, shout out to Whittaker too, because to overcome that early adversity, to go on and win that fight, and to fight as well as he did, that's just super
Wait,
impressive.
so Mike Bell's scorecard, he had a 30-27 for the entire fight, right?
Yeah, for Whittaker, yeah.
Do you know what he scored each round?
Well, 10-9.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
10-9. Oh, yeah. No, yeah, I get it now.
I just like, I don't know, man. I don't think you can give a guy a round when at the end of the round he was barely even conscious. Like, I get that he was winning the first 4 minutes. Like, I get that. Like, he was piecing up Costa's leg. Like, that needs to be said. Costa could barely stand by the end of the round. But, like, when he hit him with that kick, the fight almost ended. And I think that it doesn't matter if there's 2 seconds left in the round. Like, that was a big shot. And if that fight were to keep going for a few more seconds, that could be an entirely different outcome. And I get that the clock stops, but at the same time, you can't just ignore, when you're scoring a fight based off damage, I think that a huge shot like that gives you the round. Like, I don't get, like, it doesn't matter if the other guy won the first 4 minutes. Like, if you get hit with a shot like that, you lost the round. That's just how I view it. Some people may disagree with me on that, and I think that the rules are kind of broad enough where, like, that's fair. But at the same time, I don't know, man. I think that when you get hit with a shot like that, it's crazy.
Yeah, I think it was might have just been something where Robert Whittaker was clearly had the entire fight.
Yeah, maybe the guy was maybe he was lazy. He wrote 10-9 before the kick
Yeah.
landed. He was like, "Let me get the scorecard in." No, but I don't know. Like the right guy won. Like you said, it's like I'm glad that we're talking about a round rather than a whole fight. You know what I'm saying? Like, because the right guy won. End of story. You know what I mean? But if maybe like if this fight were a bit closer and it was more debatable and that was how Whittaker won, then I might be a little bit more like bothered by it. But the right guy got the decision anyway, so it doesn't really matter much to me if I'm being honest. But it's just it was worth noting because I think like when you almost finish a fight, I think you deserve to win the round. But speaking of scorecards, I kind of wanted to go on to this next fight, and that is Ian Garry versus Jeff Neal. So that was a split decision, which Ian Garry won 230-27s, and this is why I love judging. Two judges scored at 30-27 for Ian Garry, and then the other judge scores at 29-28 for Jeff Neal. So that means 3 judges gave Ian all 3 rounds, and then the other one gave Jeff 2. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I love how there's that much subjectivity in these fights. But, you know, scorecards aside, I do think Ian Garry deserved to win the fight. I didn't think it was a very good performance. I don't know what the commentary team was talking about half of that time. And Ian Garry's timing is great. He's extremely quick. He's an awesome fighter. I don't disagree with any of that. But the footwork was not as impressive, in my opinion, as they were making it out to be. Jeff Neal was able to pin him against the cage multiple times. He didn't do much with it, which is why I think Ian Garry ended up winning the fight. But in terms of the game plan, and I almost respect it that Ian said afterwards, he's like, Jeff Neal hits hard. He goes, why would I not fight like that? And I was like, yeah, I get it. But at the same time, I just think that this win wasn't very, I was going to say spectacular, because it really wasn't spectacular, but at the same time, I think for a guy like Ian Garry, who's undefeated, I think he could have took it to him a little more and still won that fight, because when he was landing, and Jeff Neal wasn't really able to land on him. But in general, like, I didn't like how Joe Rogan was talking about how, like, why does Jeff Neal have his hand up? I'm like, well, there's kind of a legitimate chance that he won that fight, so I don't know exactly what he's talking about, thinking that he didn't have a chance. And, like, he was, like, in awe of the fact that it was a split decision. I was like, that was a close fight. I was like, Ian Garry didn't really do that much. And I like I said, I still think he won the fight because those the knees up the middle especially were just amazing. I think if he could have kept landing those, he honestly could have finished it. But it was just he was backing up the whole time, and he was really just kind of waiting on Jeff Neal the whole time, and Jeff Neal was really playing into that. Kind of like Costa did to Whittaker, but to a lesser extent, in my opinion. But Ian Garry, you know, he kind of point fought, and that's what won him the fight. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's worth acknowledging because Ian Garry has had better wins than this. You know what I'm saying? And you could say what you want about him personally. You know, I do think as a person he's kind of hard to like, if I'm being honest. But as a fighter, he's phenomenal. He's one of the best prospects in the promotion. But this win in particular, I don't think was a great showing from him. But at the end of the day, he got the win. That's what you have to do to move forward, and maybe some bigger and better things are coming in his future. But what did you think of the fight before we kind of move on to the future?
Well, I think now something tells me it's a matter of the division that he fights in, and now he's fighting the top guys in the division. Like before he actually like fights the top guys, like the guys in the top 5, right? Because now he's got the Colby Covington call out going and all that. I think it might be something that it's not that Ian Garry isn't capable of putting on like these great fights and stuff. Like I'm sure like he can, and obviously he showed glimpses in this fight too. But I think honestly it really might just be like a matter of just, you know, he just whatever he has to do to get his hand raised. So like in this instance, a guy that hits as hard as Jeff Neal, like he's just not gonna allow. He's not gonna play into because clearly you see with Ian Garry, like Ian Garry is not one with the crowd, and so he's not gonna play into the crowd and whatnot. Like he's just gotta get out the fight somehow and get his hand raised, and that's how I'll choose to go about it, and why Ian Garry fights the way he does. Um, and that's because I think it's, with this division in particular, like, there's so many like killers throughout, whether it's on the ground or on the feet, and so he's the one that, like, who's just gonna get by pretty much and like neutralize the strengths of these guys, and like,
And he did that versus
yeah,
Jeff Neal. That's the thing. Like, you could say all you want about the win, and I certainly did, but he, like you said, he got the job done. That's the ultimate thing to take away from this. And Jeff Neal, I know he's not as active as some of the top welterweights. Well, then again, some of the top welterweights aren't really that active, but still, I think that he's a lot better than people give him credit for, and I think that he kind of neutralized Jeff Neal a bit, even though it wasn't like a huge, spectacular knockout or something like that. But Jeff Neal really couldn't do much to him. He couldn't really land. He was just kind of plodding forward, kind of bad footwork. Ian's very light on his feet, and that's what makes him so quick. But Jeff Neal was just kind of plodding and throwing big shots, and some of them were landing, but just not enough at the end of the day. But you kind of talked about this to move on a little bit, how Ian Garry called out Colby Covington. I, for one, am here for that fight. I would love to see those two guys go at it, and I think those are two people in the UFC that a lot of people dislike. So I'd be curious to see who the fan base is rooting for. But and let me ask you this question too. Actually, is it just me, or when Ian Garry like posts those like videos online of him like talking at the camera like he was talking about Colby Covington? He's like, Colby, I want to take you out and retire you from the UFC, but he says it in like such a smug way that it feels like he's talking down to you too. Is it just me? Like when I'm watching it, it feels like he's insulting me somehow. I'm like, dude, I'm not Colby Covington. Like he's pointing at the camera. Like it's just, I don't know, man. I don't look. He's an awesome fighter. I truly believe that he does have a championship ceiling if all goes well for him. But as a person, I really don't like the guy that much. And you know me, I'm not really the type who says that about a lot of fighters. I mean, I respect him for getting in the cage and all that, and I honestly, in a way, respected how he's dealt with some of the fan, I guess, adversity that's gone his way. With all the comments and stuff like that. And I don't know if you saw this, like the one guy was like talking shit to him and talking about his wife, and his wife was there. He's like, "Well, why don't you say it to her face?" And the guy's like, That's exactly how all those idiot trolls online are. And like, I don't know what's happened to the MMA fan base. I know I wrote about that in like the Substack article, but like, who cares about this guy's personal life? Like, this is the UFC. I want to watch this dude fight the best fighters in the world because he's a good fighter. I couldn't give a crap about like what happens with his wife or whatever like they're talking about with this household. And like, why do you, like, if you're a real fight fan, why do you care? And like, I love when people say that, and like what I'm saying in the comments, and then people say back to them like, "Oh, well, why are you defending him?" I'm like, I'm not defending him. I'm like, I don't even really care about him in that sense. It's just like, why do people care so much about this guy's personal life? Like, what is this, the Real Housewives? Like, this is MMA. Like, when did this part of the fan base get into the sport? Like, who gives a crap about this dude's like family life? Like, why are you insulting him for that? If you want to insult him about his fighting style, whatever, sure, but like, who cares about this guy's personal life? Like, am I wrong? Like, what do you think about all this? Like, it's okay to not like Ian Garry. I'm not saying like you gotta like the guy. But to constantly, like, the people online who just berate the comment sections, calling them this and that, like, and these people have done nothing with their lives. So it's just, I don't know, man. It's crazy that I'm in a position where I sound like I'm defending him because I really, like, don't want to do that. But at the same time, it's just gotten so crazy lately. I'm like, God, what has happened to this fan base? Like, it just seems like they don't even care about the fights anymore. Like, this dude's an awesome fighter. For whatever you want to think about him personally, he's an awesome fighter. And, to get back to the original conversation, him and Colby Covington, that's an exciting fight. And I think he could do well in that fight because, we saw Colby versus Leon Edwards. Leon and Ian have a pretty similar style. I do think that Ian Garry could do well on the feet against Colby. And he does have outstanding takedown defense. And we didn't really see it as much in this fight because Jeff Neal was kind of holding him up against the cage rather than trying to like actually take him down. But I do think Colby will struggle to try and take him down if that's the case. But I would love to see that fight, honestly. But
yeah, and I feel like in a way it's you know, I guess this is a coincidence too that they fight in the same division, but in a way this is like Bilal Muhammad, right? Getting all these wins, and now he's like, it's to a point where you can't deny him like these top guys. Like obviously he's fought Leon Edwards already, for instance, and that's like the point it's got to. Except like now Bilal Muhammad's at a point where he should be fighting for the title and still can't fight for the title. Whereas now I think with Ian Garry, like I think I think he's clearly more of like a, I guess you could say, a popular name than Bilal Muhammad at this point. Like I
For
think
better or for worse.
yeah, for better or for worse. Like a lot more people are talking about Ian Garry, and like whether or not that has something to do with obviously the Conor McGregor influence, and like he mentioned too, like he wants to be that fight with Colby Covington to be the co-main on Conor McGregor's next card. And I think whether or not it has something to do with that, I think he knows like, hey, if I get these wins, like I have this undefeated record and all that, like you can't deny me these top guys, and like either way all I have to do is beat them. There's not a certain way I have to beat them. But that's like the dynamic, the parallel like I'm going with. It's like, well, he's gonna get the fights. It's just how is he gonna win these fights if he wins these fights? Because once again you see it with Bilal Muhammad, who that title shot is still eluding him. He's probably still gonna have to fight a top contender to get there.
You really think so? Yeah.
Dude, well, if you wanna get right into it right now, because I think our guy Ariel, he just revealed that the three names that were given to Leon Edwards to fight Leon Edwards, I think for UFC 300, like none of them were Bilal Muhammad.
That's crazy.
Which is wild, and it's like at this point it's like you kind of just like you had a feel for that guy, right? Like I know everyone wants to say this and that about, but it's like at the end of the day, like he's still like the record speaks for itself, and so like he
deserves the shot.
Yeah,
like it's end of story, But anyway, back to the card though. I mean, like you were saying, Ian Garry won the fight. A win is a win, and one way or another, he's going to be moving up, and we'll see kind of how his maybe like star power will impact his chances at fighting for the title in the future if he is able to fight and beat Colby Covington. But to the next fight, though, this is a performance that I feel almost the exact opposite about, and that is that Merab Dvalishvili defeats Henry Cejudo in what I think is probably the best performance of Merab's career, honestly, because, I mean, the fact that he just ragdolled Henry Cejudo, who's an Olympic gold medalist in wrestling, and I know Henry had the arm injury pretty early on in the fight, but even before that, Merab was still kind of winning the exchanges, and after that, it really was just completely one-sided. But, I mean, that was so exciting, man, because he outstruck Henry. He outgrappled Henry. I mean, he made it look easy. When he picked him up, I think it was in the third round, and just carried him across the cage, and then didn't slam him, just threw him on the ground, and then kind of like held him in that choke for a little bit, talking to Mark Zuckerberg outside the cage. Like, it's just super impressive to see how good this guy has gotten, and I think that he's truly a nightmare matchup for anyone in that division. I love Sean O'Malley, but I don't think Sean O'Malley wants that fight, and I think he's going to do everything in his power to not have to fight Merab if he gets through Chito Vera, obviously. And I don't think that's him thinking that he can't win the fight. I just think that it's him seeing his options. Topuria, he was talking about Ilya Topuria maybe going up to 45, fighting him, champ versus champ, which I can't stand because anyone who hasn't cleaned out their division first, in my opinion, should not be talking about going up. But Sean O'Malley is a superstar. I could definitely see them doing that if he wants it. But at the same time, I think that he knows that Merab is a risky fight. It's a tough matchup stylistically. And Sean has great takedown defense. But at the same time, this dude's cardio, and talking about Merab, is just unreal. I mean, I don't know if you saw that Ray Longo was talking about how him and Aljo basically did 3 5-minute rounds in the dressing room, to like prepare. And this dude went out and basically did another fight versus Henry Cejudo and just put on an outstanding performance against a guy who is, in my opinion, the best combat athlete we've ever seen. And, when you put everything into perspective. But it's just amazing. He was able to hurt him on the feet. He was able to beat him on the ground. And at the end of the day, this dude should be fighting for a title next. And I can't fathom anyone else getting that shot. And it's crazy to me that could happen. But what did you think of Merab's performance, man?
So pretty much, I feel like there was, Henry Cejudo, whether he was coming into the fight or like during the fight itself, you felt like there was no way that Merab was going to be able to ragdoll him. As good as a wrestler that Merab is, like there's no way that he's going to be able to out gravel him pretty much. And so I feel like Henry Cejudo will probably just try to keep Merab close, just a lot of short striking and whatnot, and then just like rack up points that way, like defend takedowns and all that. But dude, like you can't really like teach like the kind of pace that Merab fights at, and that's the thing. Like even for that to even overwhelm a guy like Henry Cejudo the way it did, and then lead Merab to the win, like that speaks like freaking volumes. And I was saying too, like on the Twitter timeline, like a lot of people are taking notice to how much of a like just a pit bull that Merab is in there. It's just a guy that's just gonna come forward at you at just every single second of the fight. And
it seems like it throws his opponents off when they're in the cage with him for the first time, because that pace is just like you were saying, it's so unreal. And it seems like Piotr Yan, all the other guys that Merab has fought, even Henry Cejudo, like it seems like it's just a step too fast. And even on the feet, Merab is pretty underrated. He's a good striker. Like I thought if Merab won this fight, it would be with maybe solely the striking, but the fact that he was able to do what he did to Cejudo, and again, I get Cejudo looked like, I don't know if you saw this, but like Cejudo clearly like had, I think it was what would be a broken left wrist, because his arm was very swollen, and I do think that impacted him. But at the same time, before that, Merab was doing well, and I think that Merab was going to win that fight.
I think this was just straight up like the best all around performance of Merab's career. Like honestly, you got like a taste of everything that he's capable of doing. Like even for him to pick up Cejudo and then drop him and then start wailing on him on the ground, like
it was demoralizing for Henry. Like when Henry was picked up and over Merab's shoulder, I bet in his head he was like, "You gotta be kidding me!" So bad.
I think he really got a taste of like, because before the narrative was, like Merab is such a drag to watch, and like you have to force yourself to stay up to like watch him grapple with these guys and keep guys on the ground. But like dude, like you really like, now I think it's starting to be clear, because now obviously he's well in line for a title shot. Like now it's clear that this guy clearly has all the stamina in the world to go 5 rounds and like leave without a scratch on his face. So
I think that he deserves the title shot no matter who's the champion, whether it's O'Malley or Vera. He deserves that next shot. He's been waiting long enough. I know it was because of Aljo being the champion. He didn't want to fight him, but this was just a statement win for Merab, honestly. And the last thing I actually wanted to ask you about before we move on to the main card opener, and it's related to Henry Cejudo, actually, not Merab. But I don't know if you saw that Dana, they asked him after the fight, why didn't Henry get a chance on the mic? Because we knew that he was going to retire if he lost. And Dana said that, well, he's already retired, and that was Merab's statement when he deserved it. That was his moment. And like when he first said that, I was a little bit pissed off. But then I really thought about it, and I thought about like that era when Henry retired for the first time after the Cruz fight. I kind of agree with what Dana's saying, because Merab, I do agree that Merab deserved his moment in the sun, because that was just a statement win, the best performance of his career. But I kind of agree, because Henry at the time wanted more money, but Henry wasn't a huge draw, and he retired in the midst of his prime after that Dominic Cruz fight. In my opinion, that was one of the worst moves that I've seen from an MMA fighter. I think that it was a big mistake. I know Monday Morning Quarterback, looking back, and knowing what we know now, of course it looked like a bad decision. But even back then, I was like, that's kind of a dumb move because I don't think he's gonna get the money that he wants. I think they're just gonna say, okay, you're retired. Okay, the division's gonna move on, and that's exactly what happened. And now you look at him since returning. You know, he lost to Aljo, who's obviously a great fighter. He lost to Merab, who's obviously a great fighter. But now he's retired off of 2 losses. It's just like, what was he trying to do? And you know, California, the fun thing about California that I love is that they release what the fighters make. The commission releases that. And Henry Cejudo only made 150 grand for this fight. I know I say only, but you know, when we're talking about guys making, like, you know, Volk made like 750K, and you know, you got guys making in the millions who are big stars. Henry Cejudo is a pretty, you know, big name in MMA, despite maybe not being a huge draw to like the casual audience. 150 grand for a guy of his caliber, that's not really a lot. And like, if that's what he retired for, to get himself to that level, it really just seems like that was one of the worst decisions we've seen by like an MMA fighter in terms of career mismanagement.
Here's the thing, like you just mentioned that, like probably he thought like he was gonna have more leverage in this, like, hey, like, you know, good luck moving on without me and whatnot, like one of the most premier athletes that your promotion has ever seen, like, you know, I'm out of here on my own terms and all that. And then not obviously not factoring in like for this division in particular, bantamweight, like how you know how many guys are up and coming and that are so exciting to watch and that are going to get like their shot at some point. Like obviously Sean O'Malley, for instance, who's the champ now, like
who's a star.
Yeah,
like,
I don't think he really factored that in. And like, you know, you like, there's no secret that Henry Cejudo's got a freaking ego, and so like that clearly like played, you know, that clearly you would think had to play into why like he retired the first time when he did, and now he's coming back, and now like immediately thinking like, okay, well, I'm about to have like the best the greatest comeback that UFC's ever seen, that bantamweight's ever seen. Like, I'm gonna get this title easy.
And then you say he's gonna go up to 45.
Yeah,
that was the plan, and I get it. Like, you know, he deserved that, but at the end of the day, when you look at it, he probably ended up losing millions of dollars, because that's that's a couple. We retired in what, 2020? That was when he fought Cruz. And then he came back in 2023 versus Aljamain Sterling. So that's 3 years where he could have fought. And if he made even what he made in this fight for those fights, he could have been close to $1 million, if not way more than that, with pay-per-view points when you're the champion. I just think that it was a bad move. And you know, I'm all for fighters trying to get paid more, but when you got to do it strategically. And it seemed like he tried to retire before he became the huge draw. You know, when he seemed like he was just really reaching his prime and people were really starting to respect him. And he walked away. And then when he came back, it just hasn't been the same. It just feels like he lost money. His legacy is going to be impacted by this, at least in MMA. But it just, I don't know, man. I didn't like the move. And at first, like I said, I was a little bit ticked at what Dana said. But then when I really thought about it, I was like, well, he's kind of right. I was like, it sounds a little bit disrespectful. It sounds harsh. But when you really sit and think about it, he kind of screwed over the company in that way, retiring the way he did it so abruptly. And, you know, you look at it now, it's just, I kind of get it.
Exactly. Like, thinking once he comes back, like, you know, he's got to win just the one fight and then he'll be good. He'll be whatever. Yeah, like, once again, the featherweight plan and all that, like, all that's going to be in motion right away. But, like,
he could have fought and gotten there, you know? He's a good enough fighter to clear the division. He could have done that, and he didn't.
Guys are still active when you're away, and they're getting better and better. And now you find yourself across from Merab, who, you know, like you would have to think, like, Henry understands, is an absolute, you know, can every second of the fight can hang with Henry in any grappling situation. But instead, it's like, well, there's no way he's gonna ragdoll me. Like, I'm gonna make him work for it every single grappling exchange that we have, and that's just not what happened, you know. Not to say like he was looking past Merab, but like, you know,
I just think, like you said, he has an ego, like, and it's not a bad thing. You have to have an ego in MMA, but at the same time, I think that he
I
thought
don't
that there was
think-
no way he was going to lose the fight,
Yeah,
and
I don't
that's what
think he
happened.
thought that Merab was going to give him like literally the performance that he did, like all around and all facets of MMA the way that he did. And
Well,
so
let's just end it on this, like saying, on a positive for Henry. He retires, 2 Olympic gold medals, or I'm sorry, Olympic gold medal and 2 UFC titles. That's what I was trying to say, and just an outstanding career in combat sports. A little bit mismanaged, but still,
yeah,
in my opinion, like I said, the greatest combat athlete we've ever seen. He's done so much, and if this is the end, I think that he still is one of the best that we'll ever see, and I think I'm personally grateful that I've had a chance to watch him at least as long as we have. It may have been
exactly. Like when you've accomplished what Henry Cejudo has, and now you're watching from outside, and you're not in there yourself, and you see all these guys like, and you plan on coming back. Like, of course you're gonna think it's all smoke and mirrors. It's like, okay, well, I've been away, like still training and all that, and like once I come back, like I'm gonna shut all this hype down. This Sean O'Malley hype train that obviously everybody's gravitated towards, and now himself obviously has gotten to the top. Like, I'm gonna shut it down, and then it's gonna be my reign again, and there's nothing that anyone's gonna be able to do about it. But times
moves on.
evolve.
We were saying it in the main
Exactly.
event.
Like you got to be able to adapt to the times, and that's
Yeah.
just how that goes. And now it's Merab's time, it's Sean O'Malley's time, and
Yeah, it's a
Henry
new era.
Cejudo's on his way out. So
We're going to see what happens in the future. But great career, Henry Cejudo, and great win for Merab. Seems like title shot is imminent. Hopefully it actually is. But awesome performance. But to move on to the main card opener, Anthony Fluffy Hernandez with an awesome start to the main card, choking out Roman Kopylov with that rear naked choke. Just vicious. I mean, the first one that he got him in was over the chin, but he was squeezing so hard you could see that Kopylov was hurt by it, like, because that hurts. You're getting your jaw crunched like that. That's really bad. And I get that it's not like under the chin, so he's not choking, but it's hard to breathe. It hurts a lot. A lot of people would have tapped in that situation, and Kopylov, he managed to tough it out, but then the second choke, that was the one that really he cinched in. And Fluffy's got great jiu-jitsu in general. I think he's a 12 or 13-2. Let me just double check on Fight Pass, Tapology. Yeah, he's 12-2 now. So it's and then I think how many wins are submission? I think it's like a lot. Yeah, eight of his 12 wins now are by submission. So that's like literally 2/3 of the wins in his career. I think it's time to start saying really that Anthony Fluffy Hernandez has really awesome jiu-jitsu. I mean, he submitted Adolfo Vieira, who's a jiu-jitsu world champion. I don't know if you remember that fight. He dragged him into deep water and choked him out. And Kopylov, he didn't even need to drag him into deep water. It was in the first round. It was just a great start by Fluffy.
Yeah, I think it was definitely great. Obviously, you see the result too. Like, it was great to have this fight on the main card, and then obviously the co-main as well as it went. Like, it's good to see that middleweight is still clearly, like, there's still clearly guys here that are able to elevate this division one way or another, despite how many times the title has changed hands recently. And a guy like Adesanya, who you might not see for a little while, and then once again, like, how many times the title, like, even Alex Pereira has now moved up and whatnot. Like, you can see how many times that the title switched hands. And it's good to see that there's guys that are still very much in it for that shot, and how you see that clearly, like, the title can change hands any given moment. And then so you got these two clearly trying to get back in that, trying to get in that echelon, like, period. And I think seriously, like, they both, even Kopylov got finished, like, they both put on a great showing. I think, like, Kopylov looked good in that first round. Obviously, it seemed like things were gonna go, like, smoothly for him one way or another, but
it was just a fun way to start the main card. Like, they picked a great fight to really start
definitely.
it.
I think Fluffy just just absolutely picked it up, and then he had like he clearly like he cinched in that rear naked choke like so smoothly. Like obviously,
Beautiful.
exactly. You see he didn't have it fully locked in, but you just mentioned like he still had that jaw just in absolute perilous position.
And then the
Kopylov,
second one was that.
yeah,
The second one was it,
Kopylov
like
gives
under the
the
chin, perfect.
Kopylov gives the thumbs up, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe he'll be all right. But now it's Anthony Fluffy Hernandez with the smile on his face, and then
Crazy.
he just puts him away. So that was pretty awesome, to be honest.
I have one last question about this fight because we are running a little bit low on time, so I want to move to the prelims while we can. But Chris Curtis or Paul Craig? Who would you want to see Who would you want to see Fluffy fight next? I personally would pick Paul Craig because of the jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's pretty much the clear-cut, dry answer.
Moves him up a little bit in the division. Paul Craig, I believe, he's ranked 12, and Fluffy
I think
is 15.
with Chris Curtis too, like that would be a great opportunity to like show everybody that like, hey, like I'm capable of putting on a complete fight. I can go like I got a gas tank that can go all 3 rounds and whatnot, and then like I'm not just gonna get hit and all that. Like I can put the hitting on someone, and like obviously a name like Fluffy would be a nice name to do that with. So, but yeah, really like either one I think would make for a fun fight.
Yeah, well, the main card was awesome. I loved it. The energy in Anaheim was amazing. But to talk a tiny bit about the prelims before we talk a little UFC 300 news, but Mackenzie Dern, she lost to Amanda Lemos in a fight that kind of went as I figured it was going to go. Lemos landed a lot of heavy punches, 3 29-28s, won by unanimous decision. Bless you, Tiz. And Mackenzie Dern, she just doesn't tend to do well against big punchers, but she came out tough in round 3. She couldn't really do much with the control time, which kind of surprised me because Mackenzie's jiu-jitsu is phenomenal, but she did win the 3rd round. I thought the judges got this one right. Amanda Lemos looked really phenomenal, honestly, and so I'm glad that she got the win because I really thought that was probably what was going to happen. And I just don't like, and don't get me wrong, I like Mackenzie Dern and I think she's tough as nails, but I hate how the conversation is more how tough is Mackenzie Dern versus the fact that Amanda Lemos just beat the brakes off of her. That's the conversation that we should be having, not how tough Dern is. Lemos won that fight clearly. So I think that's worth noting, despite what happened.
I think there was a 10-8 in there for Amanda Lemos.
I don't think there was, because if it was 10-8, there wouldn't be a 29-28. I could look it up though. Let me see.
Probably like the second.
I don't think it was though, because then unless I just wrote the scorecard wrong, which is very possible.
But still, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's all of them were the same. 10-9 Lemos round 1 and 2, and then 10-9 Dern round 3.
Well, yeah, but it's still for Amanda Lemos to like clearly get the clear-cut victory. Not leaving any question whatsoever. Like, oh, is Mackenzie Dern like now her striking is getting up there? Like, clearly like she's like in matchups like these, like it could go pretty south pretty quick for her, which is unfortunate because you want to see someone like that obviously put on the display that she's able to put on with her jiu-jitsu, but like kind of like to bring up Merab's fight, like if you're able to put it together in each way, like that can guide you throughout the entire fight one way or the other, and so that's unfortunate, but I think this was a good fight regardless. Good effort.
Prelims were fun, man.
Yeah.
I mean, the other fight that I was going to talk about a little bit, but since we're like really running low on time, I'm going to go a little faster with it. But Marcos Rogerio de Lima tore Junior Tafa's leg apart with those calf kicks, man. That TKO was fucking just brutal. And honestly, Frank Trigg, former UFC fighter, obviously, great stoppage by him. And the refs that we have are great, but I do love seeing former high-level fighters getting into the commission, whether it be reffing or judging or just working for the commission in general. But great win for De Lima. I do think Junior Tafa also deserves some credit because he stepped up on a day's notice in place of his brother, which is just crazy.
Samoans are different.
Yeah, dude. You said this to me over text, but you'll never see that again. So appreciate that one, but that was a fun heavyweight scrap. But overall, man, UFC 298, massive success. We needed a card like that. But to move on a little bit, talking about the future, right after UFC 298, massive fight announced, UFC 300 main event, Alex Pereira versus Jamal Hill. I kind of said this on the short that I put out yesterday, on just to like quickly recap it, and then I'll ask you what you think before we go. But I think this is a great fight. I know it's not the marquee fight that UFC fans were hoping for, but these two are awesome strikers. It's going to be a high level fight that's going to be on the feet. It's going to be a war. I truly believe that. And two like true champions, you know, current light heavyweight champion versus the former light heavyweight champion who never lost his belt in the cage. Pereira, in my opinion, is one of the biggest stars in the sport. And I think that if he can get a big win on a massive card like UFC 300, I truly do believe that he can be the next UFC pay-per-view star. I truly believe he has that level of influence. But what do you think?
Well, look, you know, I think it's good that, like, now there's clearly main event. At first it was like, oh, like, are they even, you know, are they just going to move up one of these fights that are already announced to the main event? But now you've got the main event. It's for a title. And like you just said, like, you've got one of UFC's most budding stars in this fight as well. Like, either way, people are, whether you're upset, let down by it, the announcement, underwhelmed by it, like, either way, you're likely going to tune in because you want to see Poatan defend his belt, like, at light heavyweight now, for instance, against a guy that didn't actually lose it. So, like, there's already a lot to be excited for, and a lot of narratives and whatnot going around this fight. And you know, it's just awesome that you got a guy like Alex Pereira that can step up like that, and I'm not even save the card, but for a lot of people, like, you would think too, like, if you are underwhelmed like this, it's like, you would think that a lot of people would think, like, oh, like, Alex Pereira, again, like, is stepping up to save the card.
That's what I'm saying. Like, this is a great fight. You know, I get that it's not like some huge marquee name that's already like a marquee name, but this is Alex's chance to truly become that.
Yeah.
And, like, why would you not want to see that? Who doesn't love Pereira? And even Jamal Hill, he's an awesome fighter too. Like, a lot of people like him. I think that this is an awesome main event, and it's a great fight stylistically. So I said this on the short, but, like, if you don't like this fight, I think you're in the wrong sport, because this is as good as it really gets. And considering the realistic options that we had, I think that this was honestly one of the best case scenarios, really, getting this fight. Maybe aside from like a Conor McGregor Chandler, but that seemed like it wasn't going to happen pretty early on. So the fact that we got a main event like this, I'm pretty stoked. But April 13th isn't here yet. Next week is the UFC Mexico City card. 2 awesome rematches. Brandon Moreno versus Brandon Royval 2. And then Yair Rodriguez versus Brian Ortega 2. Both fights are 5 rounds. Awesome UFC card next week. It's going to be so exciting, and we will be back next week to talk about it. So, see y'all.
Feel just like a superstar. Doing all these drugs, I don't think I'm gonna see tomorrow. Living fast, brand new dash up in a foreign car. It's the type of shit that you be doing when you going hard.